Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hello and welcome to the Dork Forest. I'm Jackie Cation. I am your host of the Dork Forest. You probably know the websites, JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com. We're all over iTunes and whoever has downloaded it and repurposed it for whatever your needs. That's right. So feel free to review the show on iTunes. Feel free to email me, Jackie@JackieCation.com, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. Anyway, let's do the credits. Mike Rickberg composed and sang that song you just heard. He sang it with his wife, Sarah. He'll sing again his words to the Mexican hat dance at the end of the program. Patrick Brady is going to fix this audio, and Vilmos does my website. Okay. There are many ways to support the show. Let's talk about them. The easiest way is just to tell other people about the show and follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat at Jackie Cation and tell people, word of mouth. Another way to support the show financially, doesn't cost you anything, is the Amazon banner. On JackieCation.com, there's an Amazon banner under support the show. And on DorkForest.com, there's just an Amazon link that takes you to Amazon. And both take you to Amazon. You order like normal, and the show gets a little bit of a kickback. Doesn't cost you extra. It's just a way, if you order from Amazon, to help the show. More direct way of helping the show, you can give money to the show via PayPal. There's a PayPal button under the Support the Show page on JackieCation.com, and there's a PayPal button on DorkForest.com. You can donate directly. If you want to give monthly, I haven't made that easy. I don't have a monthly setup. I know that it's easy. I just don't have any time to do it. So you have to remember every month that you like the show and then give me money. So I'll use it wisely on audio cables and chocolate, whatever. Another way to support the show, if you don't like PayPal, is people have been Venmoing me money. I'll take it. That seems lovely. Jackie@JackieCation.com. It's just under Jackie Cation. So whatever. If you have listened to all 600 and whatever episodes of the Dork Forest and would like more Dork Forest, there are premium episodes, probably a dozen of them. And they are, in the last couple of years, if I do a live episode, it usually costs me some money. So I have been putting them up on Bandcamp, and they cost money. They cost $2 a pop. But if you go to the dorkforest.bandcamp.com, you can see those different shows. They're usually live episodes around the world. And there is also four stories on a sort of a handmade storytelling album that I made over there too. And those are just $1 each. So if you want to go to Bandcamp, you can do that as well. You can order merch on JackieCation.com. There are shirts and CDs and a DVD of my stand-up. There's the stand-up CDs, Circus People, It's Never Gonna Be Bread, This Will Make an Excellent Horcrux, and my brand new album, I Am Not the Hero of This Story. And they're all available as CDs on JackieCation.com. They're all available digitally on Amazon and iTunes, and you can just listen to them on Pandora and Spotify and whatever. So, but if you like hard copies, let me know if you want them signed or not. There's also a DVD of the Horcrux album, which is video. That's what a DVD is. And you can download that at comedyfilmnerds.com if you just like a download. Okay, there are shirts. There's my stand-up shirt, Spooky Reading Girl. There's also 2 Dork Forest t-shirts. So there's the Ranger of the Dork Forest t-shirt, and there is a Dork Forest logo shirt. And all the shirts are made in the United States, union made, so they run a little big because they're made by Americans. Other than that, my stand-up is available on the website, on JackieCation.com. You can watch my Conan sets. You can watch a bunch of different stand-up sets. You can, and then you can see what my schedule's like. Enough of this. Let's get into the show. It's a really good one. Hey, it's Jackie Cation. I'm back in my living room, and I am with New York comic Nat Towsen.
Hello.
Nat Towsen, who I always want to say Nate Townsend, but it isn't. It's Nat Towsen. And you have a podcast called Rate and Subscribe.
Yep, the Rate and Subscribe podcast.
Do you rate and subscribe things?
No, we ask people to rate and subscribe to our podcast, and if they want, they can even listen to it.
I enjoy that as an ad for your podcast. That is a great Rate and Subscribe podcast. And then you're a New York comic, so you host a show and do a show. show, book a show at the UCB New York. Which the regular one or the one on the west side?
I like to think of them both as equally regular.
Super regular, both of them?
Yeah, it's the one in the East Village. I actually grew up in that neighborhood right around the corner from the theater. The theater's on 3rd and A, and I'm from 2nd and Bowery.
And do you still live on 2nd and Bowery?
No, because that is now a giant frozen yogurt shop / brunch / condo.
Wow. So they repurposed your childhood.
Well, my childhood building is actually still there, but the neighborhood in general has been not completely replaced, but very rapidly overrun with development in a way that does not integrate into the culture and the architecture that was there before.
Right.
So part of the reason I do this show, which is sort of it's a talk show. It's a late night style show.
The Downtown Variety Hour?
Yes.
Okay.
It's called Nat Towsen's Downtown Variety Hour. And the reason I do it is because I like to talk to historians and activists, and I talk to local business owners. I bring people on for interviews, and we talk about history of the neighborhood and just cultural developments. And
so it's not a stand-up show.
There is stand-up on. I like to think of it like a late night show, except it's at 7:30, which is not the latest.
Late enough. It's a city that never sleeps, so people are tired at 7:30 as well.
Yeah, Monday at 7:30, very late spot. But yeah, it's I'll start out. I'll do a monologue. I'll have a comedian on, and then I'll do an interview. We have local businesses sponsor our trivia segment, so I have a guest host who's an expert on something, ask questions to the crowd, and then we give out pizza from the local pizzeria that sponsors us, and we're actually sponsored by a comic shop too.
Oh, awesome! Wow. Well, I'm sorry I don't live in New York and go to that show every week.
Well, at some point,
I will be in New York and I'll just stop by for sure. Wow, it actually sounds great, man.
Oh well, I'm glad. I'm glad. I hope you can come sometime.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's essentially a New York culture and history show, but I would say like every third show ends up being about comic books. And
fair enough.
Yeah, our justification of that is that comics were really created in New York. The art form was actually really born there, but the real reason for it is just that I like comic books, and I got a comic shop to sponsor the show.
Sure. And there's no reason. And comic books are like stand-up comedy. I've said it before. I'll say it again. They can be about anything. That's the great thing about it, because for the most part, nobody's watching. Nobody's reading. And I know that there are PAs calling comic book stores as we speak, looking for the next big thing. But you can still make your weird little comic and put it on the internet or print it, and no one cares.
And I like that comics, I think, this is similar to what you're saying, that they share something with stand-up, whereas someone doing something totally weird and unheard of can be seen on the same stage as someone who has their own TV show, if the lineup happens to work that way. And one thing I like about the shop, Forbidden Planet in New York, that sponsors my show, is that they have a big indie section, but it's not shoved in a dark, dusty corner in the back of their otherwise superhero-oriented comic shop.
Yeah.
They put indie books, like self-published books, where the person paid for the printing themselves, wrote and drew the whole thing themselves. They get the same shelf next to a Marvel or DC book, just in alphabetical order. And I think that's really cool. Like,
that is cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't see, most movie theaters aren't going to screen, Avatar 2 and my friend's student film. Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, because I know that Meltdown they have like an indie shelf, but it's not in a corner. It's, and it rotates just like everything else. And
yeah, they have that too, but just for the new releases the first week, they will put them next to each other, which I think is a nice,
That is a nice touch, though, if it's new release week. New release is new release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just all comics, which I think is, such an equal footing that you wouldn't find. I mean, similarly.
Because then you'll get sucked into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my girlfriend's a comics artist, and we go to Comic-Con every year. And one of the things I'm always marveling at, no pun intended, is that, imagine if there were a movie con, and, you could go to a panel and see Steven Spielberg, and then he was just hanging out afterwards, and you could just go and ask him questions.
Right.
The equivalent of that at Comic-Con, you go to these panels, and some of the people will say, yeah, if you have more questions, we ran out of time, but we'll just be walking around. Come talk to us.
Right.
That kind of direct access to the people at the highest, most mainstream part of the industry doesn't really exist in other media, but comics are still, and comedy in some way, are still accessible in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. You can talk to Dana Gould.
Yeah,
that's an attainable goal. He may not want to talk to you.
But you might just have to stand in the right part of the club for a while. And you can make
He's
that
over
happen.
there thinking. Yeah. He's just thinking, staring at a wall. And do you go to regular Comic-Con, like San Diego Comic-Con?
So I go to New York Comic-Con every year.
Okay.
I have not been to San Diego. Yeah. And then I've been to some other regional ones.
I'm sorry, San Diego Comic-Con is a disaster. It's too big.
Yeah.
I was there the first time probably 10 or 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was too big then. And then I have been and I've been probably 6 or 7 years ago was probably the last time I was there. Maybe 5, but I like to think it was half a decade at least. And, what I like is I like small comic cons because of the access and because of, like, I did this nerd cruise, which didn't have any comic books. I mean, it had a couple of it had Gail Simone was on it.
Oh, cool.
And so that was neat. I got to play a board game with her and her husband.
Nice.
And it was the three of us playing this board game, and dastardly dirigibles. And
okay, I've seen that one.
You build a dirigible. It's nice. Anyway, so but neither she went first, and then she told me to go next, and her husband looked at her and goes, Why would she go next? And she said, well, clockwise. And I said, yeah, you go clockwise. And he looked at both of us. He said, do neither of you know which way clockwise is? I'm next. So, but it was such a personal experience of being mocked openly.
And you really can't get that in other media.
You don't get that in the movie industry.
Yeah.
You're like,
I would love to have Steven Spielberg be condescending to me.
All I need
exactly
is Paul Feig's wife to mock me. That's what I'm looking for.
Exactly.
But I'm sure possibly maybe one day an attainable goal. But, so yeah, we could talk about comic books for the next, 55 minutes, but
yeah.
Well, let's talk. I was curious because you said your dorkdom was Speed Racer.
That's a big one for me. Yeah.
You like Speed? My first
Speed
crush, Racer X.
You know what? It's understandable.
I was 4 or 5 years old. He was a mysterious hero.
Yeah.
And I thought he was very handsome in his mask, for an animated gentleman, not real.
You really were attracted to that guy who's only, just his face below his nose and mouth are visible.
Right. You would have thought I would love Batman more.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, they say you don't need to see the whole person,
it's all
some people just need the front of the jaw and some personality.
And that cleft thing right above your lip.
Oh yeah.
Which has a name, but
Philtrum.
I can't. Oh, thank you. Welcome, Nat Towsen knows what it is. And so tell me about Speed Racer. What's your love? Where does it come from? What does it mean?
It's hard to, because it started out as I think this was one of the it's. Okay.
Tell me it wasn't the live action movie.
No, but I do love the live action movie. That's almost another level. We'll get to that. No, I think Speed Racer is notable as one of the first things as I was sort of figuring out this way that you can love something and then sort of like it sarcastically or ironically and then still enjoy it.
Okay.
Because I think it was one of the ones that sort of like closed the loop for that on me. When I was 7 or so years old, the TV show, the 60s cartoon, was rerun on Saturday morning cartoons.
Right.
And I was unironically, unself-awarely obsessed with it. I love this show. It's
I love
really
the car.
exciting. There's action. Yeah.
There's action. There's relationships. Eventually there's a monkey.
There's pretty strong monkey presence throughout, or chimp presence throughout rather.
Right.
And, yeah, he's an ape, I believe, but or his name is Chim Chim, so otherwise it's misleading if he's not an ape.
Okay.
But for what it was an exciting children's cartoon with action and fighting and car racing, and so I was into it then. And then at some point between then and college, I started watching the show again, and I thought it was the funniest thing imaginable. But people,
why?
I can tell you what's funny about it.
Because it doesn't necessarily hold up as an adult, but if I could come at it at that angle, I might be able to re-love it.
Okay, so I'll explain to you why I think it's funny, and the reason I say trying to understand this, I even hesitate to say ironic appreciation is that I still think it's funny and I still like it. I'm not making fun of it when I say that I think it's funny.
Okay,
and what I think is funny about it is like. There's a couple of factors that are really remarkable about it. One is that it was, made it to be a Japanese cartoon, and then it was translated into English by 4 people. And one of them is this guy Peter Fernandez, who also wrote the theme music.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and he lived in Rockland County. He was a neighbor of my grandparents. I never met the man, but I know he lived there. And so they had a staff of 4 people to translate this entire show.
How many episodes are there?
There's 52, I believe.
Okay.
But what's funny is, one thing that's funny is they play the main characters, and then every side character is so obviously one of the four of them speaking further and further and further out of the side of their mouth. They're not good at voices. They're just like, hey, we're going to have to get them, see? And then like another one. It's like some of the worst gangster thug voices. It's like,
Oh, the thug voices they're caricatures of what you might think that. Wait, so I don't think I ever knew this. Is there 4 people wrote and
4 people total, I believe, translated, because it was in Japanese originally. So there were 4 American actors who
translated it and then did all the voices?
They did all of the voices, yeah.
All of the voices.
And I think there might only be 1 woman who does all of the female voices. I think it might be 1 woman and 3 men. I had to check that. It could be 2 and 2. But it's pretty amazing.
Who does the little kid?
That's probably the female voice.
Okay, yeah, because it's usually higher.
Yeah, it's very high pitched, and then I think she also does Speed's girlfriend Trixie and Speed's mom, and then the men split up the just thousands upon thousands of gangster archetypes in like 60s
and
sort
then the
of mobster
mechanic
suits.
and then his brother.
Yeah.
It's the mechanic, his brother, and Speed, and then it's Trixie, his mom, and the kid.
Yeah, and for Spritle is the kid's name, and for
Spritle.
to give them some credit, they differentiate those voices pretty well. They all sound like different people.
Yeah, and then it's just bad guys galore, right?
Oh yeah, and that's another thing that I find really funny about this show. And I rewatched the pilot yesterday, and one of my favorite parts about it is just the fact that so much of the show are just profile shots of men screaming. I had forgotten how much, because they do that anime thing where the background disappears and you just see someone's face really close, or like a really intense looking, or like for some shots their faces will be drawn in more detail than other ones, so there's just like anger wrinkles. And the first episode just has Speed Racer's father and the villains who are trying to get his plan for the Mach 5,
right?
Or for the engine that makes the Mach 5 run so fast. And they're trying to get it from him, and he doesn't want to give it to them. And rather than just have that exchange once, there's like a 2-minute sequence of them just screaming at each other. And
wait, not even words, just screaming?
No, it is words, but
right.
But like I also like to imagine that it might just be the same man, just in a room screaming further and further into the corner of his own mouth. Like sometime in 1962, one guy went into a voice booth and just screamed at himself for a while. And they're like, yeah, that's a whole TV show.
That's a whole TV show. Cathartic. Oh my God. That is hilarious.
Yeah, it's a really high percentage. But the other, like, probably most egregious thing about it is it's one of those shows where, so the pace of the dialogue, for one thing, they had to translate from Japanese, but Japanese as a language typically has shorter words than English.
Okay.
And over the course of a 20-something minute episode, that adds up. So rather than rewrite the scripts, they adopted this strategy of they didn't re-edit any of the animation. They did not have the budget for that.
Okay.
So they actually had to just speak faster in order to...
People are talking really fast in that show.
That show is, and I think that's one of the things that attracts me to it, is that I really like... I like the show Veep. I like His Girl Friday. I like things that have sort of a frenetic, high pace to them.
I find myself
really,
West Wing,
the nonstop dialogue, or I for whatever reason am attracted to like hyperstimulation like that. So I think that's the thing that probably really triggered in me before I even knew that as a kid, was just like, this show is happening and you're watching it right now because a character is talking and then another character is talking. You can't look away for 1 second. You can't even possibly move because you're going to miss a point in the plot, except for there are these sequences where people are driving. So this is amazing. They cram all this dialogue into like 2 minutes.
Right.
Because that's how it was edited.
Yeah.
And they can't disperse it over the course of the episode. But then there will be literally a 5-minute sequence that's a car race.
Of silence and just the noise of the car.
Yeah, screeching, and then someone goes like, oh, or something like that.
Yeah, there's breathing or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of reacting non-verbally. And I also wonder if Peter Fernandez also, for the show, just went into a booth one time and just gave him some wild reactions. And they just dispersed them over the course of 50-something episodes.
Yep, right. So there's just like, crowd reaction. And, so are there scenes? I haven't seen it in decades, but I loved it when I was a kid until my parents told me I couldn't watch it anymore.
What was their objection to it?
Is that I kept having nightmares about one episode. And,
I want to know which one.
I know. I'm hoping you have seen this episode and know what my 8-year-old brain was making happen, because I love Speed Racer. It was the best. But so were they always yelling from the side, or was they also yelling?
There's some frontal yelling.
Some frontal yelling?
Or some 3/4 yelling.
Oh, fair enough.
But it was funny to notice there's these shots where it's sort of like faces popping in from either side of the frame, and just an adult man is screaming, and they're like, yeah, that's a show for kids.
Right.
Two businessmen shrieking in each other's faces.
There was a lot of shrieking. And so I want to know, like, what, okay, I'll tell you, there's no reason to, why the suspense? It was, for some reason, this is what I remember the episode being.
Okay.
Trixie has a nightmare.
Okay.
Where Speed dies. And the devil shows up.
Wait, I don't remember the devil showing up.
Was there a red mask?
That's definitely possible. I think there's an episode like later in the run where
because it would have been because Racer X had a mask, right? So there might have been a bad guy with a red mask who I thought of as the devil. And
I don't remember that. I've seen every episode of this show, so it's bothering me that I don't remember that.
Right. I wonder if there's a red masked villain in the Speed Racer. But it was all I remember is having like it was a shot of it was like a long shot of the Mach 5 in just with a poof of smoke, right? Mm-hmm. It had been crashed, and Trixie just yelling, speed, and then a big image of a face, and it was in a red mask. So that's what I remember. That was and that
gave you such nightmares that your parents were like, no more.
We're done with Speed Racer. And then I would sneak it because I was a latchkey child. So I could watch whatever I wanted.
Because like, yeah, exactly. That moment stuck out to you in the show. If you pay any attention, I think there's another thing that I found funny in once it wrapped around for me and I started watching it again is that
right.
The show is extremely dark if you pay attention. As a kid, it didn't occur to me. You watch the opening credits, and I think 3 cars explode in the race. Those are just people dying.
Right.
You just see
it's
explosions all the time.
Right.
Yeah, in the first episode, there's this car race, and it's getting really intense, and it's just this montage of different cars careening directly into the side of a mountain and just exploding. And as a kid, I didn't even go like, oh, wow, that was 7 deaths.
Right.
But
no, you
Speed
don't.
won.
You never, Speed wins the race. You never, there's not like funerals. It's not like.
It's not addressed there's an episode where they go, okay, and it's hard not to go off on tangents, but there's an episode where they go to a.
Please, this is the place.
Maybe Saudi Arabia. I really,
it's like
really
Dubai or something, right?
Yeah, but they're so. The show would be racist if it weren't so inaccurate to be like even within a region of the world you're not sure what they're talking about.
Right. It's so weirdly sweeping. It could be South America.
Right. And it's set in Japan or America.
Right.
Definitely one of those. Maybe. But there's even an episode where it looks like they go to Japan, but maybe they go to a different part of Japan. But there's an episode where they go to this country that is in a desert, and I believe they say Sando Land. But maybe Sandal Land? It's really unclear what they're saying. I've listened to it a number of times. But it seems to be like
they're being blurry on purpose.
Yeah. It's really unclear that they have a global identity that's like deliberately vague.
Right.
But they go to some country that's hypothetically in the Middle East. But the reason I bring that up is that it's in this episode that there is a 100-car race, and that's the big thing about it. And
I remember the 100-car race episode. Yeah,
and he has a rival in it. And he beats the rival by like a hair, and they're the only 2 that cross the finish line. And I watched that as an adult, and I was like, are we not going to address the 98 deaths that just happened?
That just occurred. And
people just drive off the side of the mountain, and then that's it. We don't have to see from them ever again.
Yeah, it's so weird because there's a lot of sand dunes, but then there's a lot of cliffs.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of mountains.
It's unclear, what terrain we're in.
We don't even know if we're on Earth in the end of it all, because it's a little too, like, those exist in California.
Yeah.
It's the only state in the Union that has both deserts, mountains, cliffs, oceans, and, what's left? Forests, and,
plains of ice.
There's snow, and yet also fresh water.
And I don't think Sandoland was intended to be California, unless it was like a Birkenstocks joke.
Right.
That didn't really land in the 60s.
No, I think it was Arabia. I think it was.
I mean,
I think it was Lawrence of, and
yeah, there's some headgear going on.
yeah. Is there? Oh, there's some scarves happening.
Yeah, but again, not accurate enough to pin down to like, oh, that's a certain religion or that's a certain region's,
Right.
headgear. That's just sort of a
That's
general...
a keffiyeh. That's
Yeah.
and the thing is we know what they are now, just because 45 years later, there's more talk. There's more talk of headwear.
Yes, and also I feel like this was in an era where like you could just set something in a foreign land, and like if you had a gong sound effect, like that's all the set dressing you really need. Like we don't have to sell this
It's
too
a
hard.
gong. So clearly we're somewhere where gongs are happening.
Right, and then it's like, okay, now it's in an exotic other country. Like, aren't things weird and different here? And like, no one was ever going to be like, oh, actually, I've seen photographs of Saudi Arabia, and it doesn't look anything like that.
It doesn't look like that, and that's a pagoda.
Yeah.
And so why? Yeah, but okay. So now, what is Trixie's backstory? Do you remember?
We don't get that deep into Trixie's backstory. She is Speed's girlfriend, which we know. She also
Right.
is a helicopter pilot.
Right. That's right. And she has Chin Chin, doesn't she? Isn't Chin Chin her friend?
Spritle and Chim Chim are best friends.
Oh, that's
so,
it.
So Trixie's kind of on her own. And I was talking, so two interesting things about Trixie.
Mm-hmm.
One is I was watching an episode of this show with a good friend of mine recently in preparation for this podcast. And she pointed out
Well
something
played.
that this is maybe more about Speed, but I think it'll be interesting to talk about. She pointed out something that I had never really put my finger on about the show, which is that all of the villains and most people in the Speed Racer universe are like goons. They all look like ugly and twisted, and they all
like
hold
orcs.
their jaws. Yeah, they all have like these really twisted and sneering faces at all times. The other drivers are often sneering as well, like as in if there's like a villain and he sends his goons out in the car, they all have these ugly sneering faces.
There's
And
no
it's-
happy thugs.
no, and but in general, everyone else is drawn in a more cartoonish, less attractive way. And when we see close-ups of Speed, he's the only male character that's drawn like the female characters. So Trixie, if they show a close-up of her, she has these really pronounced eyelashes. She has a really pretty face. They always make her very symmetrical or very like well designed. A few very carefully placed lines. The same thing with his mother.
Okay.
And then sometimes we meet a female, a love interest or a damsel in distress or something like that.
Oh, a femme fatale.
And they're all drawn to be beautiful.
Right.
And Speed is the only man who is drawn the same way as the women, which is he's a very
Oh, he's also
pretty-looking
pretty.
man.
Okay, so his dad and
His dad's a little gruffer. He's drawn a little bit more like a cartoon. He's got a big mustache and he's got like a more round face. But Speed looks like Elvis. Like he's got the long sideburns and his hair is always very carefully coiffed, even though he's wearing a helmet most of the time.
right, no hat hair.
And he has very pronounced eyelashes too.
And Stridle doesn't.
Spritle does not. Spritle is drawn much more like much more cartoonist style. I mean, these are both
Okay.
cartooning styles,
Yeah.
but like Speed has Bambi eyes, and Spritle,
Yes.
looks like more like a cartoon chipmunk, your Chippendales.
Right. Okay, yeah, because him and his ape buddy are okay.
And to be fair, like they're for the youngest kids, right?
Right.
The little kid character is there for like the younger brother watching the show,
Right.
And then the older brother wants to watch like the cool
Elvis guy.
right? And I always thought that Speed was cool. Like as a kid, like he had he is dressed like Elvis. He's got the white pants.
I always thought he was
and gloves.
Elvis.
Yeah,
It was like
I'm-
Elvis or Tony Curtis.
I'm pretty sure it's a direct reference. Like I think
Yeah.
that because at that time, the show is coming around in the early '60s, late '50s. I don't know when exactly it was developed, but
Right.
So when they start doing sketches at that time, Elvis.
And you want a cool kid, it's
Right,
going to be
yeah,
Elvis.
exactly. And
Yeah.
you're in Japan. The American cool guy is Elvis. So
Yeah.
he was drawn to look like that, which I had recognized throughout time that he's like more stylish than other people. And the other drivers often have like pretty stylish clothing or like nicer hair. Like they're more handsome than the rest of the reality.
Right.
But it hadn't occurred to me that Speed is like also just has this beautiful face. Like they draw him like female beautiful almost.
Yeah, he is symmetrical and gorgeous and uncanny valley kind of.
And just
handsome.
again, these incredibly long eyelashes for whatever reason.
Well, who wouldn't want them?
Yeah.
Are there now? I can't remember any episodes if there's a femme fatale. Is Trixie ever in trouble? Does she ever get jealous? I feel
She does get jealous, but there's a couple of different characters where it'll be like Speed has to save a woman and Trixie's upset about that.
don't save her.
Yeah,
I don't think you
knock it
understand
off.
how many people die in this show.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Let the woman
You're fighting a losing battle here at this point. Just try to cross the finish line. There is one of my favorite episodes where there is another female character who needs rescuing, and Trixie is, I would say, at least ambivalent. Is an episode called The Car Hater.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you remember this one,
no,
but it is.
I love the name of it.
Well, it's perfect because so to back up very slightly, one of the things that I think is so funny about this show, and you're asking me, what's funny to me about it as an adult? One of the things that I think is so funny is that there's literally zero subtlety. Like, it moves very quickly, but they can't hide anything from the viewer. In the first, the second two-parter is about, it's the mystery of Racer X. It's about, who is Racer X? And, they spend the first episode setting up that there's this mysterious racer a few years ago, and then this Racer X showed up on the scene.
In the same sentence, almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. But they spend literally a whole episode setting up the fact that, like, he doesn't know who this is, and also your brother ran away 5 years ago. I told him not to do that dangerous race, and then you don't want to race with that Racer X. No one knows who he is, and Racer X is miraculously a very good racer, and he's one of the only one who can give speed and run for his money. And they spend the whole episode setting up this, like, who could it be thing. And then in the recap to episode 2, where it's just a voiceover explaining what happened in the first episode, it says, Racer X, whose speed doesn't realize is secretly his brother, Rex. And then they keep recapping. So they're so bad at subtlety that they didn't even remember that in the previous episode they had left it a mystery.
We didn't tell us.
No.
Yeah, they didn't tell us yet.
I mean, it was obvious.
There should be an episode 3.
But they think it's so obvious that they can just say it in the recap part because it's like,
We all get this, right?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about the show is that it is just kind of in a competition for itself for how little subtlety it can provide. I watched an episode with my brother, and we were like, oh, I think I see what's going to happen here. And then a minute later, they were saying, I think, the exact words that we had said out loud. And he started laughing. He's like, I forgot, once we figured out what the plot was, that they were going to do it with just zero nuance whatsoever. There is a character there's one episode where they are, they're working on their car, and there's this guy they have to worry about from the rival motor company. They keep referring to this rival motor company. And, they're a small, literally, mom and pop car company, and it's just their family business. And this is like a bigger company. And they've been referencing it for about half the episode, the rival motor company. Yeah. And then they cut in, and the CEO's name is Jack Rival. And on the wall it says Rival Motor Company. Which is like my favorite reveal. It's so stupid.
Oh my gosh. I think my parents made me stop watching this because it was dumb.
It's incredibly dumb.
They're like, oh, this isn't helping.
But that's the thing. Like, every time you think you know exactly what's going to happen, they find a way of doing a more obvious version of that. Like, your brain creates nuance because we know how stories are supposed to be told. So we're like, oh, and then they'll probably be like, a mysterious other driver. It's like, no, his name's going to be written on his chest. Like,
mysterious.
Yeah, no matter what they do, they will actually surprise you, but not surprise you by subverting expectations that they set up on purpose, but by being more obvious than you just could conceive.
Right, and you're like, possible. Oh, I didn't see that twist. No, that's a crazy twist because there's no twist. You just untwisted something that was barely twisted.
Exactly, yeah, the twist is just the lack of any tension in the narrative whatsoever. It's really amazing.
Does Racer X ever, is there, spoiler alert.
Go ahead, yeah. I mean, the show came out over 50 years ago.
Exactly.
It's all on Hulu, though, if you want to pause the...
oh, there you go.
Yeah, the original series is all on Hulu if you want to pause.
I have my sister's Hulu.
You can tweet at me, I'll give you my Hulu password, and you can pause the podcast and listen to it, or watch it now.
Watch it right now.
What's your question, spoiler?
My spoiler question is, I forget if Speed ever does find out it's X.
Oh, it's a good... Brother. It's a good question. And in one of the final episodes, Speed confronts Racer X about who he really is, and Racer X punches Speed in the stomach and drives away. Problem solved.
God, problem. But okay, so what about Racer X without his mascot? Do we get to see that? Does he?
We see that in the second two-parter, in the one, so in that recap, it ends, Speed Racer comes to the family's house, the Racer family's house in the middle of the night, and he goes to take a shower for whatever reason. I don't know if he's homeless or what's exactly is going on,
but he's just at his parents' house and he's taking a shower?
Right, he's come back, but as far as they know, he's dead or has run away, and but he just decides he stops in the middle of the night, and the first episode, I believe, ends with Speed approaching the bathroom, realizing that there's someone in there, and that Racer X's mask is laid out on he's left the stuff like out on the couch outside of the bathroom for whatever reason, but his gloves and his driving uniform are all out there. So we, the audience, see Racer X undress, but Speed doesn't see it at the time.
Okay.
And he manages to get out of that.
Out of that,
I think there's like a creative Steam situation in the way that only like hand-drawn 2D animation Steam would really make sense, because they couldn't really do opacity back then. So Steam is just a solid object, and therefore narratively you can hide behind it. Your face and your genitals. Right, exactly. Yeah, two little clouds protected it, essentially. You're like, oh, but he clearly does sit-ups. Good for you, sir. Yeah, oh yeah. And okay, and then does Racer X ever talk to his dad and his dad not know who he is? It's hard to tell because they're so like, again, right. It's hard to remember. The question is like, what do they know, and what's the difference between what the characters know and what do we know? Because they're so overt about it that sometimes it's hard to forget. To remember who knows what, because you're like, why wouldn't I? This is so clearly so obvious. Right, but for the most part, we don't see them interact. We see Racer X only in the racing circuit later on. After the there's a couple, like I said, towards the end of the series, they confront him about it. Right, and now who are Spritle and Chim Chim? Spritle and Chim Chim are Speed. So Speed's the middle child, and he's kind of like the savant of the family. Okay. So there's three brothers: Rex, Speed, and Spritle, right? Yeah. And so Spritle is actually his little brother. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And his name is Spritle. His name is Spritle. What is Speed's real name? Do we know? It's Speed. His first name is Speed, and his last name is Racer. Pardon me. Were you expecting some second level meaning here? Right, I forgot that his rival in the name was of the Rival. Show. Yeah, his name is Rival. His literal name is Speed Racer. Like, his dad's name. What's his dad's first name? His dad's name is Pops. Dad Racer. Pops Racer. Pops Racer, yeah. Which had to have been weird as a kid, but eventually worked out for him. And, I have this whole stand-up bit about... I'm gonna marry Pops Racer. No one's gonna think that's creepy, because my name is Mom. Exactly. Well, I have this whole stand-up bit about my tendency to nitpick and break every story apart down to the... But the example I use in it is the Berenstain Bears, and they have a very similar thing, which is... It's Mama and Papa Berenstain are their names, and right. Which was like, gotta have been a rough childhood, but it's great that they found each other. I am Chris Berenstain, and I'm Mama Berenstain. Right. It doesn't really work. Let's marry and have children so that these names make sense. Right, exactly. Nat Towsen. Let me just say your name again so that people know it's Nat Towsen. And is it at Nat Towsen on Twitter and things? Yep, Twitter, Instagram, anything. Towsen. Nat Towsen. All right. So, how do we get the chimp? How do we get the ape? It's not really clear why they have an ape, but I will say that he wears a uniform. So he's in the pit crew? I think he's an employee, yeah. Yes. Well, they certainly write him off. He and Spritle have like red and white striped uniforms, as does the mechanic, I believe, is Sparky. Another person who like really found his calling. Right, I forget about Sparky. Named their child Sparky, and luckily he's like an electrician now. No, I remember Spritle hiding in the trunk a lot. Pretty much every episode involves Spritle and Chim Chim, and it's also funny because there are a number of episodes where like they talk about the weight of the car. Yeah, it's a problem. There's an episode called Mach 5 versus Mach 5 where someone gets the plans to the Mach 5. They make Of course, there's just these anonymous criminal organizations that appear to be Italian gangsters wherever they are. They all wear like fedoras and suits and stuff. Wow, like, Peter really didn't like the Italians. Apparently, yeah. Well, he didn't draw the show. Whatever Japanese animator did it. Didn't, or had seen one mob movie and was just based every criminal off that forever. What was the name of the guy in It's a Wonderful Life who played Nick, the bartender? Sheldon Leonard? Yes. So Sheldon Leonard is the basis of all of these guys. Every one of them. Sheldon Leonard played Italian gangsters in every other movie he was ever in. Mm-hmm. And then he played the good guy bartender in It's a Wonderful Life. And then he went on to executive produce The Dick Van Dyke Show. Anyway. I did not know that. There we go. Fun fact, Sheldon Leonard. And I have been compared to Sheldon Leonard. Somebody told me in the 90s that I was like a female Sheldon Leonard. And I was like... Did you take it as a compliment? I didn't know who he meant. And then I looked it up and I was like, dude, you wear a beret. It was some comic in Minneapolis who wore a beret. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, opinion slightly devalued based on attire.
It's I get it. You think that I'm handing out wings here to pixies.
So, okay. What was I? Oh, right. So,
Yes, please.
Mach 5 versus Mach 5. It's anonymous Italian-ish gangsters.
Right.
Build a Mach 5, duplicate.
Yeah.
And it's just as fast as the Mach 5. Speed can only solve problems by going very fast. Every problem solved in this show, whether it's emotional,
But in a circle.
yeah.
For some reason.
Some of them I think are like
Over
the
the road?
100-car race is like from one place to the next. I think, but some of them are probably left.
That's the definition of a geographic, man.
Right. So they only know how to solve problems by going fast. So like this is like in some ways it's the ultimate challenger because it's someone who's just as fast as him.
Right.
And the way that but what happens is the reason that car has entered the race is to steal something in this foreign country, like diamonds or something like that.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of like criminal activity that happens to go on during a professional car race in this show. It's like people are using it to get something illegal from one place to
another place.
Yeah, and
when
I guess
you
I
could
think
just
they'll
drive
just
there.
blend in. Yeah, or like drive slower and not make a big deal out of it. Just like stop off at a way station and like kind of hide it in the back of the truck
Oh my God,
or something.
I have to watch the show again.
But no, it's always like this criminal plot revolves around them actually stealing something during a car race.
Okay.
And sometimes it's stealing from another racer. Sometimes it's just a way to get from point A to point B. And in this one, they've stolen something. And the way that Speed actually catches up to him is that the other Mach 5 is heavier because it's weighed down with the stolen goods. So it's slightly slower. So Speed wins by being faster in the
There
end
you go.
anyway.
And Spritle is clearly not in the trunk.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like in every other episode, they're weighed down by the weight of a chimp and a child.
Right, which
not-
has got to be at least 65 pounds.
Yeah, it's not nothing.
Right? Even if he's 7.
I think chimps have some serious muscle density too.
Yeah,
so-
yeah. But I think that these are at least 35-pound people.
Yeah,
Or-
and I would say in pretty much every episode, they Spritle and Chim Chim pull off one of two tricks. The main one being that they are told, "No, you have to stay at home," and then they get in the trunk of the car.
Oh, right.
And no one's like, "What about the last 23 times this happened? We should check the trunk of the car before you go on a professional car race where most of the cars explode."
Right.
No one ever does.
No one ever does.
And then the other trick that they pull, which is a real favorite of mine, is the one on top of the other in a trench coat to pass as an adult.
They totally do that.
Yeah, but they put Chim Chim on top, so it's just a ape's face.
Right. It's always the chimp's face.
They never explain why they do that. Spritle's always on the bottom, and then Chim Chim is the head sticking out. And then people are like, "Ah, yes, a tall chimp." Of course, you may have a mission.
Of course, you must. There must be some reason for you to be in this bar.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, you have good taste in long jackets.
Oh my God. All right. Are there any other characters you'd like to discuss before we get into what I want to know? Is why clearly you don't have epilepsy because you saw the live action program and didn't die.
Yeah, no, I'm alive. I'm trying to think if there are other characters. I mean, Jack Rival is a real favorite of mine.
That is a classic.
It's pretty amazing. There's another villain named Crusher Block. I think that was a good one.
Wow.
There's a lot of amazing. So I will tell you the character that I wanted to talk about because we were talking about other female characters.
Yeah.
And also talking about every problem being solved by driving really fast. One of my favorite episodes, The Car Hater, is an exception to how they solve that problem. They do solve the problem by driving really fast, but I love that, in the world of Speed Racer, everything is about racing. This is, again, same friend who pointed out the eyelashes, pointed out to me, I love how the world is all about this. Everyone you meet thinks that not only is racing them, like Speed is the hero, not of just the racing circuit, he's the hero of their reality because he's the best racer, and that's the metric.
The only yardstick being measured?
Right. It's the only thing that matters in this world. And I had this moment, and I promise I'll get to the Car Hater, but I had this moment. I was watching the Speed Racer, the Wachowskis film, which I also love, which is another totally insane endeavor. I was watching it. My girlfriend had never seen it, and we were having a screening at a friend's house. We projected it really big, which is really the only way to watch that movie. And about, I don't know, an hour and a half into this 2.5 hour movie, during one of the there are 3 driving sequences. True to the show, the sequences are way too long. There are 3 car races in the movie, and they're each like 20 minutes long.
Oh my God.
But during maybe I think the second car race of the movie, we're several minutes into the racing montage, and she bursts out laughing, and she's just like, "You can't drive. You can't drive," because I don't have a driver's license, and she was like, "This is your favorite thing?" We've been watching people drive.
For 15 minutes.
For 15 minutes with little dialogue. This is your favorite thing. You can't drive. And I occurred to me, I was just like, I don't think that this show is about driving.
And yet, it's entirely about racing.
But it could be about anything, is my point, because everything in the show is about driving, right? So I think the thing that attracts me to about it is that it's about focus and it's about determination. And it's like this, this guy who is always, in a flow state and is, just never, always deals with doubt by doubling down and like, I have to be the fastest person.
Right. And so how does he get out of it in the car hater?
So in the car hater, the car hater introduces this villain who is, philosophically antithetical to the world of Speed Racer in that he doesn't like racing. He thinks cars are dangerous. In fact, he hates cars. He rides a horse.
He rides a
horse and he spends the beginning of the episode riding around on a horse and hitting people with a whip.
Oh my God.
And so
this is one of the greatest episodes of the Dark Forest ever.
He tries. Oh, good. I'm glad. He tries to interrupt a car race on like a big, a lap circuit on a big oval by just getting on there with a horse and trying to chase them down. He's trying. Basically, he gets out there.
1 horsepower versus many horsepower.
Right, but this is his plot. Jesus. It sounds even stupider when I say it out loud, but his plot is to get in the way so that the cars will try to swerve so that they'll crash so that everyone will see how dangerous cars are.
Oh my gosh.
Not how dangerous guys with horses on the road are.
Right. Not how dangerous people who cause accidents are. Oh my God.
He literally jumps over the fence in the horse and then causes an accident and is like, see? Aren't cars dangerous?
Oh my God.
And he has this daughter who is this like, sort of a damsel in distress type, and that's one of the ones where Trixie's like, not totally having it because Speed is like enamored with this girl and she's very sweet and she's drawn in that very pretty style and that's his daughter and she, is
she wants to drive a car.
But she's forbidden from being around cars at all.
At all.
And then she ends up meeting Speed, right? And there's this, she sees him in secret and of course there's, some tension there with Trixie as well.
Why wouldn't there be?
But her father does not approve of this at all. And then she comes to watch a race and her father comes to, I believe, ruin the race, try to cause a car crash. And he's like, what are you doing near this car? You can't be near a car. And he's furious, and he whips people for a while with his whip. I'm not sure what that has to do with hating cars. Maybe it's just more of a horse thing. Like he's just like has a crop.
It's like he's keying people.
Yeah, exactly. He's just like, multiple shots of people just reacting to a whip. And then, he gets furious with her, and then he tries to take her away. And there is a crash. She gets injured. There's a crash. And he's like, I have to take her to safety. And his horse, there's on the side of this mountain on this long race. And his horse gives up. And his horse will not ride.
Oh, my God.
The
horse breaks down.
Yeah, the horse breaks down. The horse collapses on the side. And they're trying to take him away from her. He's like, no, I'll put her on my damn horse. And then the horse refuses. And they put her in the Mach 5. And they manage to get...
because bucket seats. That's where you want to put an injured person.
Yeah, well, it's better than sloped over the back of a horse that's falling down.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
In the options given, it was one of the better. It was one of the better two. And I think the Mach 5 has a back seat for some reason, which doesn't make a ton of sense.
For some unknown reason that doesn't make any sense, because that's clearly where in the DeLorean, what's the name of the the time travel thing, the flux capacitor.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the flux capacitor goes.
For the time travel episode, yes,
for the time travel episode of Speed Racer, which I would love to see.
I wish there were. There is a psychedelic episode that is
you know what? That
amazing.
Might be the nightmare one.
I was wondering about that when you said that earlier. But so to finish the car hater.
Yeah.
He can't get his daughter to a hospital or to get medical attention in time. And they're like, there's only one way we can do that, is we need a car. And so Speed solves the problem of being this man is philosophically opposed to cars. He still even solves this ideological problem by driving very fast. And in so doing, proves that there is use to cars. And then the guy has... At the end of every episode of Speed Racer, the character either is carted off to jail or has a literal 180-degree emotional turnaround.
Oh, really?
So if there's a big boss, usually they arrest him, and then the goons are like, hey, car racing's not so bad. Hey, a good life is actually what I wanted. Maybe I'll be a mechanic now or something. Right. And then they're fine. So the guy, the car hater, realizes that cars can be good and it's all about responsibility and you know, you don't have to be irresponsible. And then Speed says something the same. It's like, yes, cars are good or bad. It doesn't matter. The point is that you have to be a responsible driver or something like that.
Right.
And so he convinces him in order he convinces him to like cars by driving fast.
Oh my God. Of course he does.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the best. Wow. This is a new thing.
That was a signal for a new segment on the podcast.
A new segment on the podcast. Somebody is either... Hello?
We're about to be joined
Kevin?
by a man named Kevin.
You are early, actually.
Who is early?
I am doing one right now, so you got to come back in like a half an hour. Okay. I'm so sorry, man. Yeah, sure. It's going to be great. I swear to God. He was supposed to be here at 2 p.m. Because it's Memorial Day, and
You know what probably happened is he drove too fast.
we'll be editing that out.
Fair.
Fair enough.
Even that killer joke of mine right there. I have to leave the whole thing in to set me up.
I might. I'll clip it. It'll be fine. Because oh my
ego
God,
protected.
Ego protected because you wrote a joke. Do you have favorite episodes?
Car Hater is up there. I believe I mentioned this to you off mic, but I wrote my final paper of college, or the final paper that I handed into a class.
Right.
Was written about the episode The Car Hater, and I have a distinct memory that it was a semiotic analysis of Speed Racer. And
Define the word semiotic.
A semiotic is a study by which we look at signs and symbols as a way of analyzing media.
Yeah.
And so it was fun to analyze Speed Racer because, so like a name is a signifier, for example, and you know, your name, Jackie,
yes.
The name doesn't sonically represent who you are necessarily. Like there's nothing about, you know, maybe your parents chose that because they did think it would represent something about
Close
you.
friends with the Kennedys. That's why they did it.
There you go.
Nope.
I
was named after Jackie Kennedy.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but that's like, so that's an association, right? The word Jackie means Jackie Kennedy to them. It doesn't, like the sound ja and key don't necessarily indicate what you are. So that's like a thing that you would look at in semiotics is like how that sign represents its connection to the abstract concept that is you. And what's amazing about Speed Racer is that the initial signifiers are literal definitions as well. Because like his name is like there's no abstraction.
Right. It's an absence of abstraction.
Right, exactly. So everything is a first order signifier because everything is named after literally exactly what it is.
Did you get how'd you do on that paper?
I got a good enough grade on that paper that I don't think I even wrote the next paper because
wow.
Well, I had to write that and I had to take a final exam, and in the final exam I wrote this one paper. We had essay options. It was an essay test, and one of them was contrast. You had to do a definition and history of modernism and postmodernism, and then talk about how they differ. So I wrote this really long, exhaustive paper, starting with Courbet, I think, and actually no, starting with The Rite of Spring, and then talking about like introduction of abstraction into modern art. And then I wrote this really long paper, and I was like, I think I really nailed that one. And then I had about half an hour to write one more essay for this test, and so I wrote a Marxist analysis of Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. And that's actually the final paper that I ever wrote for college. But among those three papers, I got such high grades that there was a thing I was supposed to submit after the final exam that I hadn't finished, and I just didn't hand it in and still
Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion is a triumph. That
movie's excellent.
It's craptastic. It is. We're not the ones who got fat. We're pregnant, you idiot. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed that film.
It stands up to deconstruction is the other thing. It's really interesting. Well, I wrote a Marxist analysis, so it's all about how money is used as an indicator of worth in this reality, right?
Sure is.
They both have this style that they work on themselves, but in ways to sort of make themselves look like they're wealthier than they are. But we know that they're doubting their own self-worth because what do they want in the beginning? They don't have jobs,
right?
And they don't have good outfits to wear, which are indicators of wealth. And so this whole thing is about them trying to climb that ladder. And then these other women who are more financially solvent, they've married men and they've become, they've become mothers, and they've married men who are more financially solvent.
They've got all the stuff that we're all supposed to have, right?
Right. And so they are therefore more valuable within it adheres to this metric in this universe. But then you remember there's the one friend who broke off from that group who became a fashion designer, and so she is even more successful, and even she's able to
Janine Garofalo?
No, it's not Janine Garofalo. She invented the fast-burning cigarette.
Oh, that's it.
It's one of the 4 popular girls. Now has very short hair, and she is a fashion designer.
Oh, right.
And so she is able to give worth to Romy and Michelle by saying this thing that you do that indicates wealth, which is they create their own outfits.
Yeah. Is actually quite good.
Is actually good, and therefore has value, and therefore you have value,
and thus you are valued.
So that's a very fast version of the final essay I wrote in college.
Holy smokes, that is such an interesting way to watch that craptastic movie, which is essentially, as far as I'm concerned, a Simpsons episode.
It really is. Down to the point of the
nerd that comes back who's super rich.
Well, there's that. But I was going to say the sort of abstract ballet number in the end with the nerd who comes back that's super rich.
Yes.
To time after time. No, I gotta respect a movie that has a no explanation, just formal break. Like, this is now a thing that can happen in this movie. It was not a musical before this.
Right.
And there's a dream sequence in that movie. That doesn't happen during the dream sequence.
Well, what you've introduced and revealed to me about Romeo and Michelle that I never really thought about was the B plot, because I have this whole thing about, and Rangers of the Dork Forest are like, we know. But I have this whole thing is that it's kind of the crappier the movie, like the more we're just putting this out, we're making a fun movie, the more social commentary it has. There's always a B plot that has a message.
I see what you're saying.
And your basic examples are things like Dirty Dancing, keep abortion legal, Footloose, censorship is bad.
Right.
Blue Crush, only true happiness is found through corporate sponsorship is the message of that one.
Right.
And, but Romeo and Michelle is clearly, capitalism is how you find your worth.
Right. And that's essentially, if
So
you break
it
it down,
could
that's
be
the
either
code
right
of
wing
that
or
movie.
left wing. It could be whatever it's going to be.
Right, especially because it's not just, they don't win by getting rich in the end, but they do win by getting the approval of rich people.
They get the approval
the
of
nerd
rich
who comes
people.
back and the fashion
And at the
designer.
end of it, they do have a job where they have their own shop.
That's a good point. Yeah. So they have worth because they have financial solvency in the end.
Right. So
I had a professor in college who talked a lot about how he actually taught media criticism classes that I took, but he taught a entire class on Buffy at our school. And I remember he showed an episode of Buffy in one of my classes, and he was like, she's being stalked by something, and he showed us this scene, and he was like, what is this scene? What's really happening? And the first couple of people were like, it's a chase scene, it's this. And then finally someone figured out, and they're like, oh, this is a rape scene. And he was like, yes, exactly. Like, this is about a person running away from a rapist. And that's a thing that you couldn't show on
network
television for teenagers. And so but that was his way of showing us this, this was a big crux of his philosophy, was that genre fiction can often approach serious topics in a way that something more literal or direct can't. Both because, yes, you can dodge around censors, that's like more of a practical thing, but also because through metaphor, through allegory, you can actually create a realization in people rather than simply saying this is what's happening and then you react to it.
Right. I mean, whenever you watch one of the dramas that is truly, like if you watch Schindler's List, there's a list. Schindler saved a lot of lives.
Yeah.
It's great. And but that's what the movie's about.
It is a very, very direct, yes.
It's incredibly literal, and it's a very well done movie. But if let's say it was against the law to talk about saving, and let's say there was a Holocaust denier, and there was like, no, that never happened. You could do it separately in a supernatural world,
right?
And,
a Star Wars universe or something like that is a great.
The creation of science fiction or fiction in general was to empower the disenfranchised to some extent, because and to give you hope. Like, now that you've said that about Buffy, it's incredibly empowering that she turns around and faces her attackers all the time, and destroys them. So it's,
and I also think that it has value even if the, tween girl watching it doesn't realize what it's about. I do think that you can glean, I think you can elicit an emotional response that applies to the thing that is allegorical for, right? Like, I still think that you
even
can
if she doesn't know,
or you can have an opinion or be philosophically connected to that in a way without having to directly confront the fact that this is a metaphor.
Right.
And in that same line of thinking, Speed Racer is not about driving cars. I never was excited about. I think it's about self-determination. I think it's about, it's about self-actualization even. And I think, it's he's this character who the only thing that really makes him a better racer is that he just cares about it more than anyone else. He just has to go fast. Like that's he's
that is
obsessed.
his thing.
And everyone thinks he's the best at it but the only reason that we ever see that he's the best at it is because he's obsessed. And I think as an obsessive person, that really, I was attracted to that. Before I had like a thing, say, for example, like stand-up, where I could go, okay, I'm going to, put my head down and work really hard on this for 10 years or something. And,
right.
and I'm going to take in as much of it as possible. And I'm going to go to as many shows as possible. I have a tendency, my friends will tell you, when I get really into a new thing, I am intolerable because, I recently found out I started drinking a different kind of liquor. I started drinking bitters, and it was the only thing I would talk about for like 6 months. My brother and my girlfriend took me out for dinner.
Is bitters alcoholic?
Oh, yeah. But like bitter and Amari and things like that. My brother and my girlfriend took me out for dinner on my birthday and both talked about how intolerable I was at the dinner because of how particular my beverage choices were. So even before I knew that I wanted to do any of those things, there must have been something in me that was like, that's the kind of person I am. I give all of myself to something. I'm not saying I'm the best at anything that I do, but it's the psychology of speed
racer. The psychology of it.
Yeah, if I had to break it down, I think that's what really attracted me to it in the first place.
Right, because if there is a message of Speed Racer and that's the message, caring about something makes you better at it.
Yeah.
And makes other people think that you're of value and there's worth in that. And yeah, so that's the B plot of Speed Racer.
Yeah, it's all about, like I said, determination. He doesn't have the leg up. There are always like everyone.
Bad guys?
Well, to give the show a little bit of credit, like they're usually up against corporations, which I think is an interesting thing. I don't know that ever was an issue for me as a kid, but it's a mom and pop company, humble beginnings, and they just make something that's really like they make something crafted on their own that's better than what these big companies can make. And it's
and there's only one of them.
Right, and there's only one of them, and they're good at it because they work together and they work really hard.
Yeah.
And everyone else in the show is, about the money.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing. They're always trying to make the Mach 5 so that they can win this race and get all this money, or they're trying to steal his plan so they can mass produce it. And that's also the main plot of the movie is that.
What's the plot of the movie?
Oh boy. Well, it involves them versus a large car manufacturer. So I do think it's interesting that like it doesn't have a money as value thing. It's
okay.
It's determination and caring is actually what's the most important thing.
They're like, no, we're just trying to make our car, and it's this one car. We don't want you to make a billion of them. And we don't need billions and billions of dollars. We just want to prove that this is the greatest car. And
right,
then
we want to do one
Speed's
thing
gonna
really well.
drive it, and he's going to win every race because he's the best driver, and we made the best car, and these are the things that are happening. And that's the plot of. And then somebody wants to steal it and repurpose it or something. Is that
or the movie you're asking? Or
the movie.
So the movie does a pretty good job of collecting like the main plots of the only thing that's really.
Is the car hater in there?
Yeah, the car hater is not in there. I was going to say they're missing the car hater.
Fair enough.
There isn't the psychedelic one, but the main arc of the show goes into the movie. The major difference is that they don't do the rapid talking. It's a very frenetic paced movie, but the dialogue, there is some slow dialogue. I think they had to make a deliberate choice there of like how crazy is this movie going to be, because the movie is essentially one big montage. There are very few scene breaks. There's a lot of like faces fade through the screen. It's a very abstract version of montage.
Yeah.
And they have, so, they very rarely cut and stop a scene and then start another scene. It's just kind of constantly moving.
The guys that did it,
the Wachowskis directed it.
The Matrix guys?
The Matrix guys. Matrix ladies now.
Now Matrix ladies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they did that. They did Cloud
show
Atlas.
business. I'm over here. I'm outside of the box. I knew that brothers did The Matrix, and then they became ladies, and now they do other movies. And the movie they did was there is Speed Racer.
Speed Racer.
Okay.
They also made Sense8 on Netflix.
Nope.
Oh my God. Well, that's a whole other story, but
Sure.
it's one of the most insane, self-indulgent things I've ever seen. But they made Speed Racer the movie, which. I think is yet to make money. I think it currently has.
Oh, really? Still in the hole?
In the hole, yeah. But it is. I maintain that it is, in fact, a very good movie. I've seen almost no other movies.
Is it available on Hulu or Netflix?
I'm not sure. I recommend if you watch it, trying to make sure you're watching it in 1080p and on as big of a screen as possible, because it is one of the most colorful, visually stimulating movies I've ever seen. I would compare it like a little bit to Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where like the animation style like works with the reality. Like they do a part where like the lens flare turns into hearts when one of the characters sees the love interest. Like there's a lot of reality warping going on.
How
it's
was the
almost
acting?
all CG.
Speed and Trixie and...
Well, the acting is amazing because the guy who plays Speed Racer, Emil Hirsch, is good. I think he does a good job with that role, which is because he's kind of like a kid who's just like really motivated.
Gung ho.
Some of the actors are very much like Speed Racer, the TV show, side characters, where they're just like, hey, I'm here to say this thing. But then you have John Goodman and Susan Sarandon play pops and moms, and there are these monologues that are so emotional, and it's so funny because this movie is so silly and cartoonish and ridiculous, and they play it like they're playing a Oscar-worthy drama.
Shakespeare.
There's this line where
on the raceway.
moms, yeah, there's this whole monologue where moms is talking to him, and she's like, when I see you out there, what you do out there on the track is art, and it makes me so impossibly proud to be your mother. And it's like,
which is true to the plot.
she sells it so hard too.
Nice work.
And meanwhile, she's
Sarandon.
probably in a green screen room. Like most of the movie is CGI. And they throw these lines at John Goodman where like they just make him say all this made up shit that is not real. But there's a part in the car called a Bernoulli converginator, and he's like,
Bernoulli converginator.
Doesn't have the kick of a Bernoulli converginator, and he says every time he says it like it's a real thing.
Oh,
but they just make him say all these crazy things.
He's an actor.
Yeah, they're very real actors in this movie. But yeah, it's about the family. Racer X is the older brother. He died, quote unquote, in this very dangerous rally race, which is in this version, there's like official racing, and then there's rally racing, which is according to Pops, it's a back alley sport full of thieves and liars, and so, but the money's really good. And Rex died crashing in a rally race, and now it's years later, and Speed is about to break Rex's record in a race, and he takes his foot off the pedal, and so he doesn't break his brother's record, but he still gets really famous, like he's qualified in this race that his brother was like, on the rise in that same race. And so then Royalton Industries, which is a manufacturer that makes really fast cars, they want to take over the Racer family business and for Speed to be officially sponsored by them. But in doing so, that they would give over they would give away the plans to the Mach 5 and everything.
Oh, right.
And there's this like really emotional monologue where Speed tells the story of watching the 43 Prix on TV with his dad, and how like that moment when they were there together, it was like after Rex died, and then they start cheering, even though it was a rerun, they start cheering and screaming, and he's like, that's what racing's about to me. I never want to sell out. And then the villain responds with another very long monologue of himself, and he like starts laughing, and he's like, you stupid little boy. And it ends when he says like, the only thing that matters is money and the relentless pursuit of power. I want to do it as an audition monologue someday. But that's like the whole movie is like these crazy, like intense monologues. And then, then the whole thing is about
2 20-minute racing.
Three 20-minute races. And they try to cheat him in the race, and Speed has to go into a rally race, and Racer X shows up. And there is a really incredible reveal where Racer X in the flashbacks is played by a different actor, but adult Racer X is played by Matthew Fox. And they do a flashback where he gets plastic surgery, and he takes the mask off, and he's Matthew Fox.
Oh.
It's a really amazing reveal.
I'm in.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
Now, Towsen,
yes.
You've done the Dork Forest.
Hey, thanks.
We are at an hour, and this has been awesome.
This was really fun. Thank you for having me.
Had the time of my life, and people should go find at Nat Towsen, NATTOWSEN, and UCB New York on Mondays, Downtown Variety Hour, 7:30, and your podcast, Rate and Subscribe Podcast.
The Rate and Subscribe Podcast. Please remember to rate and subscribe.
So, thank you for doing the show. Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?